Hello, my name is Valerie O'Donnell and welcome to my Pecha Kucha presentation. Here I will discuss my process and project development of my textile portfolio for practice and expertise in Semester 1, where I explore woven textile designs and structures inspired by nature for interior design. I started my project by creating a mind map of my ideas and my research. I've always loved the process of weaving and have been fascinated by using innovative structures to create 3D fabrics on the loom. I wanted to challenge my technical understanding of woven textiles and find applications for structures in interior design with some architectural concepts. After getting my initial ideas onto paper, I had a clearer understanding of where next to take my research. I was greatly inspired by the concept of soft architecture and designers like Annie Albers or Studio Boone, where they explore spatial design made from fabrics. I went to an exhibition by Nino Textiles and was inspired by how they use storytelling and nature in their structures. This inspired me to create my own storytelling through fabric. I have always been inspired by the natural landscape that surrounds me. As someone that suffers from anxiety, being outdoors is something that has always soothed me just by being in the moment. I feel like this has become part of who I am as a designer, and I want to continue bringing the healing qualities of nature into my designs to share with others. I was particularly inspired by the cliffs and rock formations at Cove Beach near where I live. The organic shapes and rippling textures of the stone fascinated me. Being surrounded by these ancient walls of stone made me feel tranquil and at peace. I thought it would be a challenge to turn these stone faces into soft fabric textures that could be used to create soft rolls of celine fabric. I looked at trends on WGSN that supported my ideas and concept of natural textiles in the home that bring calmness and healing qualities, such as escapism, cave-like spaces, neutral colours and cocooning interiors. I hoped that I could create a calm space using natural textiles to create fabric rooms that can adapt around us. From doing research into weave structures, I went back to the beach to start working on gathering textures which I could use to inspire the textures used in my weave designs. Since I am heavily inspired by textures, I wanted to see if I can transfer these textures of stone into my sketchbook. Taking these drawings wasn't easy as it was very windy and the paper kept blowing away. I found that creating observational drawings on the cliffs gave my drawings in my sketchbook a better impression of the landscape as I tried to capture the elements in my mark making at the cold, wind and shadows which I could put into my fabrics. I felt that being in a natural environment, I could create some of the atmosphere sitting out of the elements and put it directly into my drawings. Using my thematic research, I experimented with different styles of paintings to create abstract organic patterns inspired by the cliff face. Each piece has a fluidity and rhythm to it. I was inspired by Japanese brushstroke paintings as I thought they looked very elegant and captured the feeling of nature. I wanted to take these patterns forward into jacquard or print designs. I then created a mood board using some of my sketches and photographs to try and capture the essence and atmosphere of my project. I wanted to have a very calming feel to my project, so I used layers of my sketches to create a gentle feel and express my own unique style as a designer. I then moved on to start creating a colour palette. I was inspired by the neutral and organic colours of my paint swatches and watercolour paintings, as well as the natural landscape. I wanted each colour to capture a moment of feeling I have had on the beach, so I carefully named each colour to tell a story. Since my project is heavily influenced by textures, I decided to create a texture board. I gathered objects on the beach and cliffs like stones, shells, feathers, sand, and bits of pine leaves that are blown onto the sand. From the objects, I put them together on the board to help better describe and tell the story of textures of the natural landscape. I went on to design my robe inspired by my texture board and sketchbook. I had sourced high-trust yarn to create crafts weave structures to experiment with three-dimensional cloths. I wasn't too sure what the finished result would look like as this was my first time using high-trust yarns, so I kept my draft simple and sourced some yarn from the weave shed inspired by textures from my sketchbook. Here you can see my process of setting up the dobby loom. After I had my plan on paper, I could start creating a warp. The whole process took about a week in total. I started by making the warp on the warping stakes, stretching the warp onto the beam, then pulling through the heddles and the reed, before tying the warp on. Because the yarns I sourced were white, I wanted to introduce colour by painting the warp. I thought this would be a good way to translate my watercolour drawings into my fabric and create an organic and abstract pattern in my weaving. I made up some acid dyes in the print workshop and experimented with different printing techniques, but unfortunately I ran out of time and didn't manage to dye my woven samples. Here are some of the results of my dobby fabrics after washing. I use a delicate wash setting in the washing machine to protect the wool yarns. I really like the undulating ripples and bubbly effect the high drift yarns created in my fabric, and thought the texture successfully captured the essence of the textures of the cliffs at Cove. I went back to the sketchbook stage. Influenced by my research, I decided to make some origami out of my drawings which I could turn into a weave design on the jacquard machine. I found the origami challenging as it's all about neatness and precision, and I am quite a messy person, but I like the way the techniques turned out and I want to take this forward into a fabric. Since I didn't have time left in the semester to weave another warp on the dobby loom, I decided to use the jacquard machine to save time creating double cloth samples. I decided to see what would happen if I used my origami structures to weave a pattern. With certain yarns, I hoped this would create a three-dimensional effect. I used the artwork program on Scott Weave. After washing my jacquard samples, I used steam to set the yarns into place. The synthetic blend of wool yarn held the structure into place. However, the fabric was too thick to hold some of the folds and creases, and I didn't get a neat and precise structure. But I think this was a successful start, and more trial and error is needed. I also created some complementary fabrics using my patterns. From my experimentation, I created an ideation board where I show my concept of weaving from research to paper to fabric, and how it could be used in an interior space. Though not all my samples were successful, I think I made a good start with experimenting with yarns and texture and weave design that could be taken forward into next semester. Thank you for listening.